Welcome, lady friends. What's up? It's your girl here, Olivia, international life and business coach. If you're a creative and ambitious woman who wants to have breakthroughs not only in your business, your bank account, but also your brain, then this is the podcast for you, girlfriend. Get ready to rock your online business, master your social media presence, and monetize your passion from your mobile. Woo! It's time to elegantly strap on those lady balls and jump in. Are you ready to start slaying your side hustle? If so, then join me. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. I am super thrilled to have Dana Drahos with us today. She is my personal podcast manager, and she is awesome and actually willing to jump on an episode to talk to you all and answer all of your burning questions from Instagram. Welcome, Dana.
Hi, thank you, Olivia. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to have you here because I know that from the market research I've done on Instagram, I've compiled a bunch of questions for you and I can't wait to hear your responses.
Yes, I'm so excited to answer, and there's such great questions too.
Yeah, they really are. So let's jump through the first one. Well, actually, before we do that, Dana, do you want to just tell everyone a little bit about yourself? Like, you're a podcast manager, you work from Vietnam, you live like the independent location lifestyle. Obviously, you have your own clients and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I'm originally from America, New Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl, and decided almost 2 years ago now to leave my typical 9 to 5 like corporate lifestyle and come move abroad. And originally I started out just teaching English in Vietnam. And then after that, kind of wanted to figure out how I could create more of a freedom lifestyle and be able to just work online and work from wherever. And so I started looking into different types of roles in that. And I already loved listening to podcasts and sort of started realizing that there's a market for podcast managers. So yeah, kind of fell into it, started researching it heavily, and have really been liking it so far. And now I have a few clients that I manage their podcasts, and I also do in-person workshops in Vietnam. I live in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, and it's really exciting because people don't even know about podcasts in Vietnam. It's still so new. They don't even have a word for podcast in Vietnamese. So when I try to explain it to them, it's really difficult. But for the ones who do know that there are podcasts out there, they are really excited to learn more about them and to even make their own. So I'm so happy to be kind of part of that process of, bringing these new podcasts to the world in Vietnam.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I was actually surprised to hear the fact that they don't even have a word for podcast over there, which like blows my mind and basically tells me that there's still like huge growth potential in this area.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing your story as well, because I feel like a lot of people, I think it's good to hear about people that are living abroad and running their own businesses online, because it's not something you hear about every day on the news or through your friends or anything like that. So I know for me, I loved hearing episodes like this by other people, because I was like, wow, people actually move overseas and work from there. That's insane.
Yes. Yeah, it's not easy, but get a handle on the lifestyle, and there's ups and downs every day, but ultimately I would much prefer doing this than go back to my corporate job that I was doing in the States.
Yeah. A lot more freedom. And you're also building your own team at the moment, aren't you? You're bringing people on to help you like expand your business.
Yeah. So it's quite a lot of work to manage a podcast, and there's so many different parts to it, like so many different zones of genius. You've got the editing and the show notes writing and social media, and it's all these different, there's like technical and creative aspects to it. And so I found that trying to do it all myself, while it's possible, it might not be the most efficient or like the best way to go about it. And there's other people out there who thrive off of just editing, and other people who thrive off of the social media stuff. I really enjoy the show notes writing aspect of it, so I figured why not make it more of a team production process and overall bring a more quality product, I guess you could say, to the clients.
I love that. And I like the fact that you touched on the fact that there's actually a lot of roles that go into producing a podcast and the episodes inside of that, because it's not just like you just rock up and you talk stuff and then it's done. It's like,
Absolutely.
yeah, like you've got to prepare a topic or a theme or something like that, some sort of value that you can offer, and then you've got to jump on, you've got to record it, then it's got to be edited, and then there's a whole process from there as well, which we can jump into a little bit today. But I know that most of the questions around, from the people that I received on Instagram, is more going to be about how to get started. I know a lot of the people that follow me and interact with me are always asking questions like, where do you start? How do you start? What's this about? What's that about? So I thought we'll just address the immediate questions today. And then we might even do a future episode down the track with more questions that people have if they want to know more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the workshop, the in-person workshop I'm doing in Vietnam is actually 6 weeks long. So you can really like drill down into detail, and it can take so long to learn all these things. But yeah, I think starting off just at a kind of high level, getting through some questions will definitely bring some value to people.
All right. So question 1, which I got from someone, was how do you start? Where do you start? And what is the starting point? And I loved this question. And this is the reason why I brought it to you, Dana, because for me, I totally suppressed the memory because I found it very techie and tricky. And it was like the blind leading the blind, except there was no one leading me. And I just remember feeling very overwhelmed by the process. And when it was finally done, I was like, thank Christ for that. It's over. And then I could actually do all the fun stuff. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. So what I'm doing with these in-person workshops is the place we start actually is understanding why you want to do this podcast and why you are doing this topic. If you even have the topic in mind, of course, the first place to start is knowing what is your topic, but also why are you doing a podcast, and even like why for you personally, and then why for other people. So what value is it bringing to you in your life, as well as how will this help other people? I think there needs to be that balance, because if you're only doing it for other people, like, oh, this is going to help so many people, it's so great, eventually you're going to burn out because it is a lot of work. And I think you're going to lose that sort of fire that you had in you maybe in the beginning. And then if it's just for you, you also might start to feel less motivated because maybe you're not getting feedback from other people, or you're not sure like how this is really helping in the greater sense of things. So yes, understanding your motivation for doing it, as well as why are you choosing a podcast as your vehicle for content among like all of the other avenues out there. Like some people are really into blogging, some people would rather do a YouTube video channel, and there's pros and cons to all of them. So sort of looking at why are you choosing a podcast as your vehicle for content.
I think you touched on a very good point where you're like, so for everyone that, is listening to this, the why is probably the first place I'd start. Why do you want to start a podcast? Why would people listen to you? Like, ask those sort of questions. And the thing is, as well, is like, as Dana just said, if you're doing it for other people all the time, you're going to burn out, you're going to run out of puff. Yeah. There has to be a reason for yourself as well. Because I know a lot of the responders on Instagram are like, I just want to help other people. And it's like so beautiful and lovely. And I love that about you guys. But it's also like, can it help you build your business and your brand? Is it a creative outlet for you? You're like, what are the other reasons why you want to do it as well? Is it a way for you to express yourself, or, connect with other people more, or build something for yourself as well? It is important to have that balance of both. Wouldn't you agree, Dana?
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like I've recently found this in doing my own podcast, because originally it was just all about how it's helping other people. And then I would just feel so kind of exhausted and sort of feeling lost, because I'm like, wait, why am I doing this? Like, what is this bringing to me? And so I had to sort of realize, okay, I really enjoy having these deep conversations with people. This is fun for me. And once I sort of was able to hold on to that and be aware of that, then it was like, oh yes, like I can't wait to show up and do this podcast.
Yeah, 100%. I really like that. That's awesome. So yeah, I think the first starting point is sitting down, even just writing some notes or journaling it out. Like, why, even sit down and be like, why do I want to start a podcast? Why am I feeling drawn to this? Why, because like it does take a lot of effort. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes planning, organizing. It's not like some willy-nilly thing that you just do randomly. It's like something that you invest yourself into. And if you have a strong why, you're more likely to be consistent and show up and make it successful long term. So from a technical perspective of getting started, so we've touched a little bit on the creative side, but from a technical perspective, if someone was like, you know what, Dana, I know who I want to talk to, I know who I want to listen and reach, I know how I'm going to show up and all this and that, they've got all that stuff figured out and they're like, cool, so now how do I actually create this and make it come into fruition? What would be your advice for starting the process of actually creating the podcast, quote unquote, physically?
Yeah, I get what you mean. And I also just want to sort of echo what you were just saying as well, is that after you do the why, then you're going to want to think of who are you talking to? And you can do very similar to a customer persona. You've probably heard this term in marketing, but it's also helpful to do a listener persona and to understand. And if you're doing this for your business, you've probably already thought about this type of thing. Your listener would be your ideal customer, obviously, but even just doing this again and thinking about what are their pain points, what are their desires, what are their interests, and even thinking kind of down the line, what types of products are they interested in? Because later on, if you're thinking about monetizing and maybe doing some affiliate marketing on the podcast, you can really know, okay, this type of product they might be interested in, and I can share that with them and add even more value. But anyway, yeah, so your why, and then like, who are you talking to? What are you talking to them about? I would also start outlining your topics pretty far in advance. You want to have, I would say, at least 10 episode ideas ready to go before you even start publishing, start recording, because it's helpful to do batch recordings. I don't know if you do that, Olivia, ever. Do you ever like record like several episodes in a week and then you can kind of just schedule it out?
That's a great question. I would love to say yes, but the honest answer is no. Yeah, like at the very start of when I first launched the podcast, like I sat down, I literally, like, this is probably going to blow some minds here, but I actually wrote down a list of all the different things I could talk about. And as we all know, like my podcast started in the narcissistic space. So I had literally like 50 topics to talk about. By the way, my thought of what it was going to be was totally different when it all kind of happened, but I had like an idea before I started, which really helped. So I had some direction. I think I had over 50 topics actually. And by the time I switched over into business coaching, I think I only got through about 25. But even then, my intention for the podcast was basically just to have me talking in all the episodes. But before I knew it, I was like collaborating with people, interviews and inquiries were like knocking on my doorstep. It was like, oh my God, okay, great, I'll just interview people. And I actually found that much easier because it's like, I've just got to rock up and ask the cool questions and they've got to come up with the answers, you know what I mean? And then I started doing some solo episodes and I was like, oh, I really like this as well. So I think it's also getting clear on like, do you want to be doing solo episodes? Do you want to have interviews? How do you want to structure your podcast? And you know what? You might not even know until you do it and then realize, oh, that was actually kind of fun. Like I never thought of myself as being someone that would interview other people. I always thought that was like for Oprah and, people on TV shows. Like I never considered myself one to do that. And then funnily enough, my dad's actually been on radio and he used to do that a lot. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something in the blood here. I don't really know. Yeah. And he actually wants to start a podcast. And I'm like, go Dad. He's like 76 and totally rocking it. So who knows what'll come from that. But yeah, in terms of batching content, I definitely highly recommend it. At the moment, I've got a lot going on in my business, so it's a bit harder to sit down and do a full day of recording, but I'm working towards that now that I'm taking on like a VA and a few people on my team. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Like you said, at least writing out your ideas, like a long list of ideas, will at least give you some direction, because it would also be really exhausting to try and come up with a new idea every single week. Whereas if you had some kind of content calendar almost, similar to what you might do with your social media, then it's not like you have to every single week be like, oh God, what am I talking about this time? Like at least planning out some topics, far in advance, so that you're not like thinking about it that week. It's just right there, and you can sort of quickly outline your bullet points to talk about.
I actually have a list on my mobile phone of topics.
Perfect.
Yeah, like anything that pops up, I'm like, oh, that's a great idea, I'll write that down. Or I might get inspiration listening to someone else, and I was like, oh, a client asked me about that the other day, or there was, like someone commented on this on Facebook, and I could make a podcast episode out of that. And like, so for the listeners, Dana and I actually work together online with my podcast, and she has this program, and like for the next, I think 5 to 10 episodes, we've got semi-mapped out, so we kind of know what topic it's going to be about or what's going to be involved somewhat. And that makes it easier too for a podcast manager, I would imagine, as well as the person that's actually recording it, because then you do have some direction, you know what's coming next, and you can be thinking about it the week before you record,
Exactly. Especially with having multiple clients, it helps me on my end to kind of see down the line what's coming and be able to prepare for that and prepare my team for that. But also, I find really helps my clients as well, because they know what's coming, and it also helps keep you consistent, because consistency is so important in podcasting. And once you start to feel overwhelmed and like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm talking about, then you might start to push it off and be like, oh, maybe next week. And then next week becomes 2 weeks later, and then you're like not doing a podcast anymore. So
totally.
Yeah.
I actually feel like since I've signed up with you, I've had to be even more onto things, because
because there's that accountability.
Yeah, definitely accountability. Whereas before I actually hired you as a manager, I just had like an editor that I hired off Airtasker, and I would just be like, cool, I have a new episode now, can you edit this? And she'd have it to me within like a week or two, and I was like, sweet. But some months I'd have like 4 podcast episodes, others I'd have like 1 to 2, but every month I always had one, because I was consistent. But having a podcast manager, it's like that accountability buddy. They're like, okay, cool, by the way, this episode's due on this date. And I was like, oh shit, I forgot about that. Yep, no worries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. So to do a little recap, so we have starting with your why, starting with listener persona, and then mapping out your topics for the content, and then thinking about your format is how we would refer to thinking about, oh, am I going to do this solo every time? Am I going to do solo 30-minute episodes every week? Or maybe a mixture of sometimes solo, sometimes interview, which is more what you're doing, Olivia. Or is it going to be just interviews all the time? Yeah, I know you asked me before, do I do batch working? And I did do that in the beginning. I recorded a bunch of episodes before I even launched the podcast, just so I could kind of space them out. That was more so, I guess, because, well, it was like a weird time for me to be launching the podcast. I was about to go back home to visit America, because I hadn't been there in 1.5 years. And so I was like sort of building up this like bank of recordings to then, like, because I interview people in Vietnam, in my city. So I was building up this bank of recordings so that when I go home for 2 months, I can just like space them out and release them. So that was my reasoning. And it might be helpful for listeners also to think about your situation in life. Like, are you trying to move? Do you have something in your life that's upcoming, like a wedding or something that you're trying to work around? So kind of think about what's going on in your life and how can you sort of help yourself to plan this out so that it's not super stressful and overwhelming. And then you'll also think about the length of your episodes. So do you want it to be like a quick 15-minute little quick bite of information? Or is it 30 minutes? Is it 60 minutes? Is it like super in-depth conversations and it's an hour and a half or something like that? So you'll think about the length, and then you'll also think about the frequency, meaning, is it a daily podcast every day? Is it weekly? Is it monthly, or something else?
That's a good one. Very important.
Yeah, so those are all kind of the building blocks, I guess you could say, of the podcast. And then so in terms of moving on to thinking about actually submitting the podcast, so now you've done sort of the upfront planning and thinking and outlining. Maybe you've even done some recording. The elements that you need to actually submit your podcast to Apple is the title, or like the name of your podcast. So you're going to want to think about the name. You also need a description, so like a small paragraph that describes what the podcast is about, and who it's for. And then obviously some episodes that you're going to publish. And I would recommend, it's always recommended to have at least 3 episodes for the day that you launch. So the day that you launch, you want to have 3 episodes ready to go live, because this gives listeners a really good sense of what your podcast is going to be all about. And it gives them a chance to kind of binge on that content, almost like Netflix. They put the whole season out, and then next thing you know, a whole day has gone by and you've watched the entire season. So with your podcast, it's almost the same, where it's like you want to catch their attention and their interest right away and get them to really dig deep, so that they are just like so looking forward to the next episodes. And then of course you also want to have your cover art. So that's really important as well, because that's what could grab someone's interest as they are scrolling through the different choices in the app. Oh, this cover art really grabs my attention. That's intriguing to me. And so that might like make someone click and then read the description and then listen. And then from the more technical aspect, the first thing you're going to want to buy, of course, is a decent microphone. And I want to say that there's such a wide range of how much money you can spend on your podcast. So definitely thinking about what budget are you comfortable with, and not going so cheap that it's like a crappy microphone, but also not going so expensive that you don't even know how to use it. And I've seen that mistake made where people think, oh, I'm just going to buy the most expensive microphone out there and my audio will just sound so great. But actually, if you don't know how to use this really expensive microphone that has like all these buttons and knobs and like, it's so, like it's so confusing, you can't even figure out how to turn it on, that's not going to help you either. So I would recommend finding the sweet spot in the middle. A lot of people go for a microphone called the Blue Yeti. It's not typically recommended by other podcast editors out there, but the one that is recommended is something called the ATR 2100. And we can like put the link in the show notes for that. But it's around 60 to 70 US dollars. I don't know how that translates in Australian dollars, but yeah, so it's not even really that expensive, and it's a good investment because you're going to be using this microphone every single time, and it's just so important to have quality audio, because that can really make or break it, like no one wants to listen to bad audio. Yes, and then definitely some headphones, even just the ones that come with your Apple iPhone for Apple users out there. Those are fine, or like the AirPods, the new AirPods. But even better if you want to get some over-the-ear type headphones, those are great as well to really like block out the sound. And it's nice to hear yourself as well. And then for editing, so once you've got your microphone, you're recording, the next thing you're going to need to do is editing. And there are free editing softwares out there, so that's really great. So far you've only spent money on a microphone and it's not even that much. Then you can get free editing software called Audacity or GarageBand, which comes in your MacBook for all the MacBook users out there. Do you use Audacity, Olivia?
I do. So
Yeah.
just bring it back to the microphone, actually. So I was kind of at that point where when I was first thinking about starting a podcast, I was like, oh, well, I feel this, intuitive little pull to podcast, but I was like, what if I do it and I don't like it? So I was kind of like, do I spend top dollar for like an incredible microphone, or do I go super cheap? And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that, because if I want to start a podcast, I want to be, decent and then improve.
Yeah.
So I kind of went like less than middle of the range. So my brother was working at like an electrical store and they had microphones there, and I actually purchased a Blue Yeti, which is funny because as we both know, it's highly promoted and marketed on YouTube by a lot of affiliate people. But then after talking to you, you're like, actually, a lot of podcast editors don't particularly like Blue Yeti. And I was like, holy crap, I had no idea. Look at the power of marketing. So so I would say if you're someone out there that's like thinking, yeah, I really do want to start a podcast, I can see myself doing it long term, don't buy a shitty cheap one. Don't buy like one for $1,000 or more. Just go maybe one for a couple of hundred, if maybe around that mark, do you know what I mean, or a bit less, or whatever Dana just recommended. I'm going to look into buying that one. So at least you're setting yourself up, with something to have a good experience for your listeners. In terms of Audacity, so I, when I was recording on my solo episodes, I loved Audacity. It was, for me, I don't come from like a technical, digital radio audio background by any means. So I had to learn and teach myself from YouTube videos. And I found it, once again, at the beginning, incredibly complicated. But once I figured out how to do it, it was like super duper easy from there. And it just became time consuming for me, which is why I now outsource that to someone else. But I found Audacity was really good.
Yeah, exactly. It's when you first open the program, you're like, oh my God, what is this? I feel like I'm a pilot in a cockpit or something. It's like all these buttons and tabs and like, you don't know. But yeah, there's so many tutorials on YouTube and even like online. I don't know if you've ever used that Udemy or Udemy. I don't know how it's pronounced, but it's one of those like online course websites. And there are really cheap online courses that you can go through that just teaches you step by step how to do basic editing. And once you know how to do it, you're so right. Like it's not difficult. It's just really time consuming. And that's why people hire other people to do it. And also in cases where if the audio is really damaged in some way, or if there was a lot of background noise, or something that needs more advanced skills, there's so many different levels of editors. There's some people who just learned online on YouTube and can do the basic stuff. But I actually brought on an editor on my team who full on went to audio engineering school and like has a degree for this stuff.
Oh yeah.
So he is amazing. He's really, really good. And something also that was important to me is that he's a native English speaker. He's from America. I think people typically, like, sometimes they outsource to the Philippines or India or something like that. And when you're editing content and the content is in English, you might not necessarily know like what parts to take out, what to leave in, and how to make it, how to make everyone sound smart, essentially. What else? Yeah, Audacity or GarageBand. So you're going to want to look into learning the basics of how to use it. And once you figure it out, again, not that difficult. There's also something that I've built into my workflow is this other online tool called Descript. and I can link that in the show notes too. But I know I've posted this on my Instagram stories, Olivia, but it's the one that you can drop the audio into this program and then it automatically transcribes the whole thing for you. And you can do the content editing in there. So it'll come up as text, like you're, looking at a Word document, and you can edit the text, which then translates to editing the audio. So if I delete a word in the text, it also takes it out in the audio, which is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Because while you're editing in Audacity, all you're seeing is the audio waveform. You're not seeing the words. So it's time consuming to go and play it back and find the exact place again that you want to take it out. But yeah, with Descript, it's a really cool tool that you can, edit it almost like you're editing a Word document. And then you would download that file and put it into Audacity. And then you can do more of the fixing up any audio issues and then mixing in your intro and outro and music and things like that. And then making the final product.
So just to backtrack just slightly, so when can you run through the process of submitting to Apple iTunes, I think it is, and can you also just talk about what the hell an RSS feed is and all of that sort of stuff, like the techie stuff that I'm not probably very good at explaining?
Yes. Okay. So super key point for your podcast. What you definitely need is what's called a podcast host. So it's confusing that there's the word host for the person who is hosting the podcast and doing the interview and stuff, but there's also a podcast host in terms of where does your podcast live on the internet. So it's the same thing as how your website has a host with Squarespace or WordPress or something like that. It's your website's home on the internet. Where does it live? You can't, or you shouldn't, host your podcast on your website because it's just so much bandwidth and data that would just make your website so slow and maybe even crash. But if your podcast lives in this RSS host, then it's you can still embed the player on your website, but it's not using your website's data to live there. Yeah, so there's the really popular one, Libsyn, and it essentially, you're just paying a monthly fee to be able to upload your audio into Libsyn. And once you open up your Libsyn account, set up your account, upload some of your audio, it's going to generate an RSS URL. And once you have that URL, that is what you submit to Apple Podcasts. Used to be called iTunes. Now they're referring to it as Apple Podcasts. So you would create, if you don't already have an Apple ID, you would create an Apple ID and then go to, I believe it's iTunes Connect or iTunes Podcasts Connect. It's just online. You could Google iTunes Podcast Connect and log in with your Apple ID, and then it'll start walking you through the steps of, okay, enter your RSS URL here, enter your podcast title, the description, attach the cover art, and then you'll hit submit. And then they take around anywhere from a few days to a few weeks to actually approve your podcast. Once it's approved, they'll send you an email saying yeah, congrats, it's approved. And then from there, all of the other podcast apps can pull from Apple's feed. So you don't actually have to, each week when you are publishing a new episode, it's not like you have to send it to every single podcast player every single time. It's just you publish on Libsyn, and then it automatically goes into Apple, automatically goes into all these other apps. Spotify is the only other one that you actually have to do another manual submission. And it's a very similar process where you would create a Spotify account if you don't have one already, enter in the RSS URL and all of your podcast information, and then you're good to go.
It sounds more complicated than what it is, doesn't it, Dana?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Even just explaining that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm probably confusing them. But honestly, like once you set up your Libsyn account, and there's so many other options. There's like Libsyn. I personally use Simplecast. There's like so many others out there. So kind of do your research in comparing the different prices, the different plans, and yeah, and then Simplecast, I haven't personally used Libsyn in the launching process, but Simplecast, it's like so freaking user friendly. It's just so obvious the way that they've laid it out. So you could even just go on YouTube and be like, how to submit to iTunes, and it'll be like walk you through that process.
This is going to probably surprise some people as well, because it surprised me. I actually found it way easier to create a YouTube account and upload videos and edit those than a podcast. And it really confused me because I was like, YouTube has audio and visual and podcasting is purely audio. So I'm like, how can that be? But you know what, guys, like if it sounds really complicated, like the thing is you do it once and it's done. Yeah. Like you don't have to repeatedly do it all over again unless you want to be someone that, you know, does this for a living and helps other people launch their podcasts. So that's what got me through it. At the time, I didn't have the money to spend on hiring someone to do it for me. In hindsight, I probably should have found the money and done it to save me the headache. But like Dana's just given you all the answers to doing that yourself. But if you're someone that's like me, who's like, I'm just overwhelmed by hearing that, you can literally just go on apps like Upwork or Airtasker and, you know, throw some money at the problem and have it fixed. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So you can totally hire teams like myself, or there's plenty of other service providers out there who literally do this, where they walk you through the steps. I do kind of a consulting call where if you're having trouble even coming up with your why or your listener persona or how to structure and outline all of those things, we kind of walk through, and then also helping with the editing and all of the technical setup type of stuff. Yeah, that's kind of the behind the scenes.
So what would cause a podcast, so once it's submitted to iTunes, Podcast Connect, or whatever it is that you call it, what would cause it to be approved or rejected? Do you know the answer to that? Like why they would reject a podcast that's been submitted?
Yeah, so there's a few reasons. First reason, this probably wouldn't like apply to so many people, but if you don't acknowledge that if your podcast has explicit content or language, so even if you drop like one F-bomb or, you know, curse words or whatever, like you have to mark it as explicit. Another thing is if the music, so if you plan on using music in your show, definitely make sure that it's like actually legal for you to have this music. So definitely don't go on YouTube and just download like your favorite song or whatever and pop that in. You can use websites like audiojungle.com, which has like a bunch of royalty-free, like licensed music that you can purchase and have the rights to use. So Apple will be listening for any content that, even if it's not just music, even if it's like, you know, you grabbed audio from YouTube or like from some other interview or something like that, they are checking to make sure that this is all original content or that you own it. Another thing is they do have specifications for the cover art. So there's a certain size that your cover art should be. There's a certain, you know, it should be RGB and like certain amount of pixels and things like that. And all of this information also is on their website. So you can also just Google like Apple podcast specifications, and they have this list of all the kind of do's and don'ts to watch out for so that you actually get approved and don't get rejected. But those are the main things about music, copyright, explicit language, and the cover art.
Yeah. And once again, it's just like a once-off fee for the music. So I remember when I had to rebrand, I forgot where I got my music the first time. And then Dana was like, here's the website, Audio Jungle, check out what you like. It's easy to get stuck in Audio Jungle for hours and hours and hours, like researching crap loads of different music, and then it's hard to narrow it down. So if you need a second opinion, like throw it out to people that would listen to your podcast and be like, what's cool? Or think about the vibe that you want to put across. Like, you know, if it's like a self-care, relaxed, you know, soulful Sunday sort of podcast, and something, you know, lighthearted will be nice. You know, like, yeah, think about the vibe that you're wanting to, I guess, portray on your podcast to make sure the music kind of matches. But at the same time, don't overthink it. Don't do what I did, where I sat there for like 5 hours going through music and listening. And after a while, they all sound the same anyway. So just go with your gut instinct and what fits with your podcast theme and brand. And once again, it's a once-off fee. So all the music costs different. It's all different price points.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be expensive to start a podcast, does it, Dana? Really?
No, yeah. I mean, so far there's the microphone, which is pretty like medium cost. And then there's the monthly fee for the hosting service, which can be anywhere from like 12 to 20 US dollars a month. Music, if you want to buy, which is just a one-time fee, which also is not even, it could be anywhere from like $2 maybe to $40. And then if you are wanting to hire a team, you know, there's like so many different ways. Like you might just have an editor, or you might have a full-blown team, or you can design your cover art yourself, even in like Canva, if you are particularly like design oriented. I am not. I'm absolutely horrible at design. So I hired someone. Yeah, I hired someone to do that. And prices can vary drastically for that as well. So yeah, it's just, you know, thinking about how much do you want to spend, and really trying to keep in mind of, you know, don't go like the cheapest possible, because you do want to provide quality show, quality product to your audience, because, you know, your podcast really reflects you, and it reflects your business, and reflects how much effort that you are investing in yourself. So if people see like, oh, she like doesn't even care, maybe like she didn't, you know, try and make this quality product, then why am I gonna hire her and trust her with, you know, whatever service it is? But also not going so crazy expensive that it's like you don't even know how to use the microphone, and you've just like totally blown your budget, and then realize that you don't even want to do it. So yeah, trying to find that sweet spot.
Yeah, like I know for me with my microphone, I got something that was like not the cheapest, not the most expensive, a little bit less than the middle. And when I took it out of the box, I was like, I don't even know how this works. And once again, I had to go to YouTube, find the exact microphone, and watch a YouTube video on how to freaking use it.
Yep.
And this is the thing, guys. So there's two types of people that might be listening to this at the moment. So there might be the type that's like, I think I want to do podcasting. I'm not entirely sure. I don't have a lot of money to spend on it. You may or may not have a business, or you might be at the start of something, kind of like what I was in December 2018. I think I was studying life. I think I started to coaching the few months after that. So I knew I wanted to start a podcast. I knew the topic, bought the microphone, got started before I was ready, didn't spend an arm and a leg, sell a kidney, or give a baby away, right? And then built it from there. So I would recommend not spending a crap load of money on it if you're in that particular category. However, if you're someone that already runs a business, has a bit of extra money, and you're sort of a busy person, why not just outsource it to someone? Like throw money at the problem, get it done, because at the end of the day, you could spend like literally a couple of weeks pulling all of this stuff together, and then you could be missing out on making money through your clients or your customers or whatever, your services or whatever it is that you're doing. So I think if that helps, like I hope that helps, you know, the people that are either just getting started or just doing it for a hobby, don't know if they're really going to love it, compared to the, you know, high-powered, ambitious, motivated woman who's like, I'm going to make this work no matter what, and I'm going to monetize it, and they're in it for the long haul. So you might as well invest, because it's going to be an investment in your business as well.
Totally. Yeah. If you're not spending money, then you're spending your time, and this stuff takes a lot of time, and you could outsource honestly like 10 to 20 hours off your plate a week. It's crazy like how long this stuff can take. And yeah, podcasting is definitely a long game. That's definitely something to be aware of before starting, is that you're not gonna publish your first episode and get thousands of downloads right off the bat unless you already have a really big audience built up or something. But yeah, it really takes time to cultivate an audience, and showing up consistently week after week, and promoting, like constantly promoting and reminding people, because people forget, you know, we're thrown so much content all day long. And you might see the first Instagram post and be like, oh yeah, that sounds interesting, I want to listen to that. And then you go about your day and you forget. And then tomorrow, if there's another post there reminding you, oh yeah, I wanted to listen to that, then they might download.
Yeah, that's good advice too. Because like, and the other thing is as well, is like once you're running your own podcast, and if you've got your own business and you're busy, it's actually fascinating, because I used to be addicted to podcasts. Like I would listen to them when I was driving 4 hours a day to and from work, when I was doing my makeup, in the shower. Like I was in that whole like phase of like learning and, you know, working on my mindset, my psychology. But now that, you know, I'm busier, it's like I don't have the time to be sitting there and listening to other people's content constantly. Like I'm very busy, like trying to create my own. Do you know what I mean? So that's the other thing as well, is like you can, like the people that answer these questions on Instagram, a lot of them had been thinking about this for over 6 months. And I'm thinking, well, you know, and I was the same way. It took me about 6 months to get the courage and pull all this stuff together without any guidance. But, you know, after listening to this episode, you've got the basics that you need right here, right now. So don't wait 6 months to start a podcast. If it's on your heart or it's in your gut and you're thinking you like to do it, just do it. And then concentrate more on actually creating your own stuff, as opposed to consuming everybody else's, because you can get stuck in that cycle for a really, really long time. But, you know, it's not to say that their stuff isn't worth listening to. It absolutely is. But just don't be someone that's sitting there, like, because I got interviewed by two lovely women in their, I think it was 40s or 50s a few weeks ago, and they had been thinking about starting a podcast for 3 to 10 years, guys. And I was like, what? I was like, you're kidding me. You could have totally smashed this out of the park 7 years ago, you know? And I was a nobody when I started. I still am, you know, like I literally built my 10,000 downloads from scratch, from 0 listeners to 10, just like over 10,000 in about just over a year. And that was me relentlessly promoting and marketing and sharing my audiograms, which Dana can explain in a second, promoting on, you know, Instagram, hashtagging the videos, constantly talking about it, putting it on my Facebook stories, putting it in my Facebook group. Like, you have to shamelessly advertise and show up and grow your podcast. You have to treat it like it's a little baby. You have to pour yourself into that thing and let it grow.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What's an audiogram, Dana? And also, do you think people need a pop filter when they first start as well?
I would recommend a pop filter, yes, which is, it's like a little squishy foam ball that goes over the top, and it's literally like $3. It's not expensive at all. And actually, I believe if you go on Amazon and if you go to buy the ATR 2100, which is the microphone I recommend, they typically do it as a bundle, like, oh, you want to buy this, might as well throw in this pop filter for another $3 or whatever. So it's super inexpensive, but super, you know, valuable, because it helps with when we make sounds with P and B, like air comes out of our mouth, and that air goes straight into the microphone, which makes this like whoosh, kind of like puff sound. And having the pop filter just helps to absorb that air that comes out. So yeah, that's another like small cost to think about. And then an audiogram is, if you've been on Instagram and you've seen, it technically is a video, like Instagram considers it a video, but you're not seeing like images move like in a video. It's basically just giving a little sound bite or a little like audio clip of the episode, which is really nice to use for marketing because it gives people like a little bite-sized snack of what the whole episode might be about, and kind of catches their attention, and it's almost like a cliffhanger, leaving them wanting more and being like, oh, I want to hear the rest of that thought, so I'm going to go listen to the whole thing. So it pretty much, you might have seen, it's like an image with an audio waveform moving, and then you can also have, and should have, the text, like captions or subtitles or whatever, of what the person is actually saying, because people, when they're scrolling through Instagram, they don't always have their sound turned on, and so having the subtitles on there of what's actually being said is great too.
Yeah, it's super handy when you're doing a little sneaky trip to the toilet at work and you're like, oh, what is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Oh, funny.
Or you forget to turn your sound off and it's like blasting.
Yeah, exactly. So like an audiogram, guys, is kind of like a trailer to a movie, except the image isn't really moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So before we finish up, another question for you, Dana, that I got was, how do you know if you're meant to start a podcast or if podcasting is for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've gotten this question before too, and I really just think that if it's on your heart, then at least go for it, give it a try. It's like you're never going to know unless you try. It's similar to if someone were to say, "Oh, should I start a business?" I'm sure in the beginning we all felt that way of, "Oh, is this for me? Should I start a business? Should I invest all this time and energy? Should I quit my 9 to 5 and just go all in on this?" And again, I think it comes back to, that's the reason why I said to start with your why, because if your why is strong enough, and if you know that you can really impact people in a really positive way through this podcast, as well as what are the benefits for you, what are you getting out of it, then the answer is yes.
Yeah.
But if you're sitting there like, and it's feeling like really, really painful, or I don't know, then maybe it's not for you. But for me, like, something just inspired me where I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. I want to do this. Like for me, it was, just to give a little background of my story, as I was teaching English in Vietnam, it's not really as common to have like a fun hobby or to do sort of creative activities. You're just so focused on, I have to get good grades, and then I have to go be a doctor and a lawyer, and there's just so much pressure from your parents in this culture. Plus, in their free time, they have to learn English. Like they have to get anywhere in life, really. So it's actually such a privilege for us native English speakers we were just born speaking English. Like we don't have to go after school every single day to study English for an hour and then go home and then do all your actual homework and then repeat, which was just like really, I don't know, it just struck me in a really sad way, because I think having hobbies, having like a creative outlet is so important to your mental health, to your personal growth. And when I would ask these students, like, what do you do for fun? They would literally say like, nothing. Like what is fun? What is fun? Literally, I'm like, oh my God, this is like crazy. And so my podcast is called Creators in Saigon. And I basically just wanted to showcase people in Saigon doing creative things, starting creative projects, who are doing it in like a very bootstrap kind of way, to show that you don't need a lot of money, you don't need like all the best equipment to do something like this. And it might even just be like, making some time to paint a little bit or something, just any little thing that you can squeeze in there, and just having like this open space to go deeper on mental health topics and things like that, because that's also not something that's really openly talked about in Vietnam, and that I've, in talking with young Vietnamese students, it's like they're like depressed and they don't even know it, and they don't have anyone to talk to about it, because it's very in their culture to like just sort of stuff that away and put on a brave face and just like do what they have to do. So for me, it was like such a motivator to do this, and even more motivating that once people listen, they're like, oh my gosh, I never thought about this that way before, or oh my gosh, I didn't know anyone else thought that but me. I felt so alone, and like now I know. So it's just those moments for me, and people actually starting new creative projects because of listening to the podcast. Like that was the whole point, where someone actually heard it and they were like, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to do a YouTube channel. I'm finally going to do it. Like this girl did it, and so can I. And he did it, and now he has like 34,000 views on one of his videos. And it's just like so exciting to me. So if you have something that strong in you as to why you want to do it, then absolutely, like you should do it. But if it's kind of like, well, I'm just doing it because everyone else is doing it, or because like my business coach told me to do it, or something like that, it has to come from your heart, from like internal.
Yeah, I believe that you should, especially in business, you should only really be doing what really lights you up and feels fun and light. That's why fun is so important, and podcasting is so freaking fun, guys, like to me anyway.
Yeah.
And I love the fact, Dana, that you're like, well, obviously Dana just agreed, because you think it's fun too, yeah?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's totally fun. It sounds like hard work, and it can be at times, but it's like so fun, rewarding, fulfilling. It's just great. And I love, Dana, where you talked about like that was part of your why for starting the podcast. It was like you noticed what was going on over in Saigon. You're like, oh wow, they're missing out on joy here. They're missing out on a bit of life and a creative outlet, and they're suppressing themselves, and they don't have to. And so that's probably what it sounds like, part of the reason why you started your podcast. And it's inspired other people to get creative in a place that it might not be acceptable to be creative over there.
Yep.
Very cool. I like that. And it's actually a really awesome moment when, like, obviously you've had this too, because someone just told you, like, because I've listened to your podcast, I've done this now. It's such a cool feeling when it's like, when you've done something that someone else didn't think was possible, they've looked at you doing it and gone, well, it's not that hard, I can do it too. And then they do it and they're like, because of you, I did this. And like I had that moment with, like the first podcast I ever listened to, which was Cara El-Labor. I listened to hers, I consumed it like it was Netflix, but for my ears. It was crazy. And I was like, wow, I could do this. Yeah. And so because of her, she inspired me. And then I did my podcast and other people have started theirs. And it's like such a beautiful flow-on effect.
Yeah. And it's so important to like keep that in mind as well, because I also see people getting, when they don't see the numbers, like the download numbers that they were expecting, and then they start feeling really down about it. Just imagine, because I'll hear people like, oh, I only got 60 downloads, which doesn't sound like a lot. But if you were to walk into a room with 60 people, you wouldn't be like, oh, no one's here. Like, that's a lot of people. And so you just have to think like 60 people actually took the time to listen to me and to my guest maybe, and like what we had to say, and got some value from it. And you also might not hear feedback. Like I actually don't get a lot of feedback on my podcast. It's only been like that one time or like a few times, but those moments are so powerful that like that's all I think about. I don't sit here and think about like how many times I didn't receive feedback, because if you think about like how many times you've listened to a podcast and didn't, comment on their post or message the host and say like, hey, I really got a lot of value from this, thank you. Like we just consume so much content all day long, and then we just go about our day. So you have to remember that if you don't hear anything back, it's not because like no one liked it or because no one listened to it. They listened to it, they probably got a lot of value from it, but it just like it takes a lot for someone to go that extra step to leave a review and to comment on your post. So you just got to kind of keep going despite potentially not hearing a lot of feedback. But for the feedback that you do hear, it's like so amazing. And it just, for me, it just propels me forward to keep going.
Yeah, that's so true. Hey, because like I remember for me, like it took ages to even get to 1,000 downloads, and I realized one day I was like, it's just a number, Olivia. Like the fact that even one, like if I could even help one person, it's like totally worth it. And of course, if you think about it like this, if you keep showing up and you keep being consistent, you keep rocking up, eventually people will show up. It's just a matter of time. But if you're doing it for significance of being like, yes, I've got this number, and then if you don't hear from people constantly from your podcast and you're doing it for feedback, you're probably not going to be very satisfied with that. Yeah, like a podcast is free, valuable information that people put together to put out into the world. But if you're doing it just so you can get recognition or glory or status or have a number fulfill you, you're always going to be underfulfilled, or you're probably going to get to a certain number and be like, well, that didn't feel how I thought it was going to feel, because it's just a number on a screen. But when you have to think about the people listening, you know, as little as 1 to 60 to thousands, whatever, like that's what it should really be about, not kind of like, oh, my podcast got, you know, 30,000 downloads. It's like big whoop. Like it's great, it's definitely an achievement, but it's like, you know, like have you made a difference in their life? Have you gotten what you've gotten out of it? Like have you, if you're doing it for business, are you actually making money off your podcast? You know, are you connecting with your audience? Like there's so much of a bigger picture than just a number on a screen. And it's great to monitor and it feels good because it's like, oh, there's progress here. But yeah, I just think if you're doing it just to be like, oh, I'm a podcaster and I've got like 1 million downloads, it's like, that's great, but people don't care unless you can give them something good to listen to.
Yeah. And always just appreciating and being grateful for where you are in the moment, like celebrating all the small wins, because if you're constantly focusing on the next thing or the next number, then you're never going to be happy. You're never going to enjoy it. I was just talking about this to the guy who started the YouTube channel because of my podcast. He's like, oh, I just want to, he's like, I only have 600 subscribers. I just want to get to 1,000. I'm like, John, literally a month ago, you had 0 subscribers and you just wanted to get to 500. And now you have 600 and you're not happy because you're not appreciating where you are in this moment, and you're just trying to get to the next number. And when you get to 1,000, I'm sure you're going to be like, oh, I just want to get to 5,000, you know, and it just never ends. So
well, that was what I was going to say. I was like, okay, cool. So you've, like, the thing is with podcasting, it's all about kind of like maintenance, right? It's like the journey. It's not a marathon, because like, what's the end game? It's like, so what, you get to 60,000 downloads and you're done with the podcast? Like, when does it ever stop? You know, and that's only something you can answer. But if you love it and you enjoy the process and you're enjoying the journey and smelling the roses along the way, and it's fulfilling you and it's helping others, it's like, there's no reason to stop, you know, unless something pops up. And you do have to be grateful along the way. I remember, because you can get into a scarcity mindset. I've done that a couple of times where I'm like, oh, I've been doing this for this amount of time now and I thought I'd have that amount of downloads. And, you know, you can have a goal, you can have an aim, but don't pin all your hopes and your self-worth on just a number. So what's your opinion, Dana, on how to get over the fear of judgment from others? Because I know people that want to start a podcast, but they're just so freaking scared to show up and have their opinions out there in the open for anyone willy-nilly to listen to. And I think they're a little bit insecure because they're like, well, what if I say something controversial? What if I, you know, don't rock up the way that I want to, or not perceived the way that I want to be? Like, what if my uncle Bob's twice removed sister hears my podcast and they don't like
it? Yeah. Again, like, I hate to, you know, keep bringing it back to the why, but it is so important just to like reiterate that if it's strong enough, and if you are speaking from your heart, and the thing is, I can almost say with certainty that you will get some negative feedback, because people have their opinions, and for whatever reason, people feel the need to say mean stuff. It definitely happened to me. The way that I mostly promote my podcast is by publishing the link in a lot of Facebook groups in Saigon, in Vietnam. Like there's tons and tons of different Facebook groups. And there are just some freaking trolls in that group who must not have anything better to do than sit in this group and just say mean things to people. And you just kind of have to think about, okay, I kind of feel bad for that person because they're not living in abundance. They're not living in gratitude if they're just sitting in this group and clearly didn't even listen to the episode. They just wanted to say something rude. And just trusting that like the people who need to find and who need to hear your content will hear it and they will value it. So one of my guests on the podcast, he said this really, really great quote that that just really struck me about this fear of criticism. He said, just remember that for the one or two voices that give you something negative, there are thousands of voices that don't say anything but are getting benefits. I always think if you help one person find their truth, that's so much more powerful than two people spending 30 seconds to say something negative.
Ooh, that's a really great insight.
Yeah, it's so true. You know, like there's always going to be haters. It's such a common story. Like anyone who's made it, anyone who's like famous and up at the top, like they get so much hate all day long, but they also get so much love all day long. So
well, even you and I spoke about that after watching, so just a side note, listeners, we were watching the Taylor Swift Netflix documentary recently, and it was amazing because like she, you know, because she's got this reputation now of being like a girl that sees all these guys and can never make it work and blah blah blah, and she gets all this hate, and she went away for like a year off social media, away from everything, and then it's like she gets criticized for that. So it's kind of like, think of it this way, no matter what you do or don't do, you're going to be criticized for it anyway, so you might as well make yourself happy. And like, I've been very lucky. I haven't received any criticism on my podcast yet. I'm sure it'll come one day. I'm, you know, like it's a given when you're putting your stuff out there into the world. But is that going to stop me from helping the people that I can or already have or want more? Like, no. Do you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't have to be something that roadblocks you. In fact, when I first came out as being like a narcissistic recovery coach, like literally the day of starting my Instagram account, I got like the most vicious, awful hatred from a therapist from overseas. And I actually need to do a Facebook post about this because it's a really good story, but I won't talk about it all here. But that literally, like, I didn't just fall off my perch. It's like someone grabbed a truck and ran me off my perch. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Maybe she's right. Who am I to do this? Like, all this doubt came up. And then at the end of the day, like, I sat with it for a while. It took me ages to process because it really, like, I was like, oh my God, is this a sign from the universe? Maybe I'm not meant to be doing this. And in the end, it was like, you know what? That's one person's negative experience. 99% of people when I came out were like, congratulations, that's so awesome, da 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 da, I can't wait to learn more, or hear more, or read more, or, you know, whatever. And I was getting so fixated on this one person. And she didn't even know me. She didn't know my intentions, didn't know my vision, my future, nothing. It's just the fact because I wasn't a therapist, I had no right to talk about this topic. And it was like, well, that was her triggering, that was her problem around the issue. It didn't have to be mine. And so it's the same with podcasting.
Yeah, and that's like some of the hate I got was the guest I had on. We were talking, the topic was how to be different, basically, like how to be unique and stand out. She was a travel blogger, and there's like so many people, travel Instagrammers, and it's like, oh my God, I've seen this same picture 1,000 times at this same temple, you know what I mean? And so she just goes about things in a really fun and creative way. And it was just so clear that this guy didn't even listen to the episode, didn't even like look at her Instagram or anything. He just commented like, she's the most basic like travel blogger ever or something like that. And like you just said, it's like, he doesn't know her. He doesn't know me. He clearly didn't listen to the episode and doesn't know like the intention behind it. And so yeah, it's like you're gonna get those people who are just coming at it from their own small perspective, and that's just one person's opinion. And her episode is the most listened to one. I was so freaked out by that comment, I almost deleted it, like almost just deleted the whole episode, because I was like, oh my god, like this is so embarrassing. What if he's right? What if, like, and then I was like, no, like, I know that I really enjoyed our conversation, and I know that I really have this like high opinion of her, and there must be other people like me out there who would think the same thing. And yeah, her
Yes,
episode is
girl. Woo!
consistently the most, yeah, it's like consistently the most downloaded one. And I don't even, promote it so much anymore. It just like grows.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, it just goes to show it's just one person's opinion. And yeah, the very first episode I published, I was just so embarrassed and so scared of the feedback. I, like, threw my phone out the window, practically, not literally, but just like could not look at my phone. I just like hid in my bed all day crying, just like so scared. I guess I was mostly scared that people wouldn't even listen to it, which was just
Mm.
so not the case. Like, because I've been talking about it, I told people about it, I was excited about it, they could feel my energy about it, so people for sure listened and thought it was great. Now, I mean, because I've been so open and so vulnerable on the podcast, yeah, at first it was scary to share these very personal things, but then once you start getting that feedback from people of, oh my gosh, when you shared this, like that so resonated with me, thank you for bringing that up, now it's so easy for me. Oh, maybe too easy, maybe like TMI. We just did this whole like sex episode. It's called Sex and Beauty Standards in Vietnam, and I it was me and two Vietnamese girls, like my Vietnamese co-host, and then another Vietnamese girl, just sort of talking about the sex culture in Vietnam and how it's like very conservative. Yeah, just sort of opening up about that. And I couldn't even believe, I was like, I can't believe I'm not even worried, or I don't even care about publishing this right now. Like, this is crazy. But I just, in my mind, I'm like, if it helps someone, if someone resonates with it, then that's enough for me.
Totally. And the thing is as well is like not pinning your self-worth on external validation too. So like even if you start a podcast and it's like totally a left field and people don't expect it from you and they're like, why are you doing this? Blah, blah, blah. And you're getting a lot of like not support. Like that's okay. Keep doing your thing anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like they'll go away. The right people will come in. If you're feeling called to do it, you need to follow that voice because there's a reason. And like I was very lucky, as I said, most people were supportive of me doing it, but don't let the lack of support put you off either. Like I remember I had that big fear just like you, Dana, where I'm like, who's even going to listen to this? What if no one ever downloads this, podcast, da da da.
Yeah.
You just got to feel the fear and do it anyway, and realize that like when you do build an audience as well, you're going to have lurkers. Most people will listen and not reach out, and some might, and that's great. Like we love that, obviously. But like, I listen to a lot of podcasts and I don't even reach out to the majority of them. I just love listening to their content. And after talking to you about this, I'm like, you know what, maybe I will actually reach out and let them know that I listen and I think it's awesome, because I'm literally listening to a podcast right now, which was recommended to me from a friend, about this woman in her, which by the way is not normally something I would listen to, but it was unique. A woman in her early to mid 40s has been diagnosed with terminal cancer, breast cancer, which has riddled her whole body. And instead of doing all the normal things, she's done the complete opposite. And she's left her 15-year marriage. She's had a sexual awakening. Although chemo drugs hasn't suppressed her sexual appetite, it's actually ramped it up and accelerated it massively. And now she's back in the online dating scene is completely new to her, and she's going all these sexual escapades, and she's like fully in her feminine power, and her best friend's interviewing her and they talk about all these funny stories that you just can't even imagine happening, but they do. And I just think good on her. Like she's even starting a podcast and she's bloody dying. Like how amazing is she? And then to think one day when she's not here, she's going to have her voice still carrying on to God knows how many people around the world. Like, I think that's so admirable.
Oh, that just gave me chills.
I know, right? I think I might actually reach out to her after this and just be like, good on you, pat on the back, like, I'm impressed.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So I think we'll finish off with one last thing. What is your favorite thing about podcasting, Dana?
Ooh,
I didn't let you know what this question was going to be because I wanted to kind of, see what you'd say on the
yeah.
spot.
I mean, yeah, like the first thing that comes to mind is just how fun it is. Like we were saying before, it just feels like playtime. And that's actually what me and my co-hosts refer to it as, because our guests come in and they're super nervous. Our guests are not like people who typically, go and be interviewed and stuff. They're just regular everyday people, and they always come in like so tense and like, oh my gosh, and they have all these notes written out, and they're like, is it okay if I mess up? And we just tell them, we're just having fun. This is just playtime. Everyone comes in here super nervous, and then an hour goes by and we have to wrap it up, and they're like, what? No, like, I don't want to stop yet. I'm having so much fun. So yeah, for me, it's just this nice little break playtime where I can just go meet up with my friends and talk about things, and then also again seeing people listen and then actually take action on what we're talking about, and to see that it really is changing lives and giving people value is just so amazing to me.
I know, I love that. And like, as you're saying, I'm sitting here and I'm like, yeah. So
Yeah.
true. It's awesome. I love it. And just quickly as well, I know I've been like getting close to the last question, every question, but what do you think the future of podcasting is? Do you feel like there's a lot of growth potential? Do you feel like it's going to explode? Do you feel like it's already exploding? Do you feel like, like, what's your thoughts on it being a podcast manager? Like, you're in this industry. And by the way, guys, if you're thinking of becoming a podcast manager, that's totally a thing. Obviously, like, Dana's here
Mm-hmm.
working overseas, making money doing this. So where do
Mm-hmm.
you see that going, Dana?
Yeah, it's absolutely an upward trend. There's reports, statistics about podcast listenership, and the numbers just grow and grow and grow. Actually, funnily enough, and I shared this with my like Vietnamese in-person workshop people, that South Korea randomly is the country with the highest podcast listenership in the world, which is
No.
just crazy. Because it used to be the US. Australia was pretty close up there, but now for whatever reason, it's like South Korea is just loving podcasts, and so it's definitely spreading all over the world. And I think this is sort of like a meta trend, but the idea of online education, I think, is really going to blow up, because costs of school is way too high. People are realizing that they can learn so much online. And I think podcasts even play into that, because it is sort of like a mini education. Maybe it's not education of like, I mean, it can be practical stuff, but it's also this like life stuff that you don't learn in school. You don't learn about mindset and how to find your purpose and passion and how to start a side hustle and all these things. So it's definitely blowing up, and companies are investing, advertisers are investing all over the place in putting their dollars towards podcasts. So yeah, it's a really fun place to be in right now, and it's constantly changing. Yeah.
It is. And as you were saying that, I was sitting here and I was like, I think I just had like a little mini epiphany where I'm like, all my business stuff that I've learned over the last, well, definitely the last 12 months, but even before that, was not through traditional means. It was actually through online, learning through
Mm-hmm.
strangers on YouTube, learning through people on podcasts. I literally listen to like business and female entrepreneur type of podcasts for years now. And I've learned all of that knowledge and stuff from that. And then my business coach. So it's like, I didn't need a university degree to do what I'm doing now. Like, I learned everything through informal means. And so I think I went to an entrepreneurial summit recently, and I wish I knew the stats, but it was like something astronomical where like the majority of people, like the average person, was going to have an online business within the next 5 to 10 years. So there's huge growth and potential there, and having a podcast is a great extra leg of your business to, I guess, build intimacy and a rapport and a relationship with listeners, you know, as well as offering free amazing content and value. It's such more of like a direct open conversation as opposed to like a quick YouTube video or whatnot, because not everyone can sit down now and watch 20 minutes of YouTube. Like, for me, I'm like brushing my hair, putting my makeup on, driving somewhere, and I like just to put something like an audio thing on, because I find that the radio is a little bit boring or not really relevant or applicable. And now, like, this is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment, but like, even now with like coronavirus, more and more people are staying home out of fear. So it's like, it's an extra opportunity to listen to podcasts.
Oh my God, yeah. Like, I literally think that's the reason why there's so many people in my workshop, because, and they even said that to me, like, yeah, I didn't really know so much about podcasts before this, but now that I'm stuck at home, I'm like listening to them more and more. So totally.
Oh, I'm so excited for this episode to come out and go live.
Yes.
All right, Dana. So where can people find you online?
Yeah, so you guys can find me on Instagram at dana.drahos, DANA.DRAHOS. And I will be posting more podcast tips on there. And I also have a website, danadrahos.com. Also, feel free to DM me with any burning podcast questions you might have.
Yeah.
Happy to help.
Let us know what you think of this episode, and if we've helped you in some way or inspired you to start your own podcast.
Yeah, since we talked so much about how you don't ever hear feedback, we would love to hear feedback.
And honestly, if you're thinking about starting a podcast and you're wanting someone to help you, Dana is like your go-to person. I hired her this year. She's amazing, very professional, very on point, keeps me organized, keeps me accountable. So highly recommend her.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Dana. I'm sure all the listeners and myself, we all appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's been fun. Thank you for having me on my first interview.
Woo! Hey. Get excited. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk to you guys about this, yeah? So if you're interested in working with Dana for a podcast launch and done-for-you services, her and her team can help you with things like cover art, editing your first 3 episodes, creating an intro and an outro with music, and doing all of the technical setup stuff and submission process for you. So all you need to focus on is literally the fun stuff. Oh my God, yay! If you're wanting to talk to her one-on-one to ask her more questions about planning, launching, that sort of thing, she offers consultation calls as well, which is so exciting. I'm so happy for you guys. She's so worth it, let me tell you. Direct message her on Instagram at Dana Drahos. So DANA.Drahos, DRAHOS, with the special code word SLAY for an exclusive discount for listeners of my podcast. Jaw drop. I'm so excited for you gals. Seriously, it's crazy. Anyway, enjoy! Thank you so much for tuning in and for spending this beautiful time together on the Slaying Your Side Hustle podcast. I am so glad that you stopped by, and if you want to stop by again, then hit the subscribe button for future episodes. For more beyond this podcast, you can email me at oliviapowcoaching@gmail.com, or you can even send me a Facebook DM telling me what you thought and what you'd like to hear more of. Feel free to hang out with me on Instagram, tag me, or share my stuff on your stories, whatever you like. If you could just take 1 second to share this episode with someone who would love it, then that would truly be amazing, and this would continue to contribute to the greater good by spreading the love to thousands and thousands of like-minded entrepreneurial and business women around the globe. Isn't that a cool thought? I think so too. See you in the next episode.